Nick Minchin, you've been in this situation before where you've had to advise leaders in the past about the sorts of things that they might say as they head out to the press conference. What do you think that Tony Abbott's message is going to be when he steps up to this most important press conference later today?
Well, Chris, thank you for the invitation to preempt my leader, but I don't think I'll do that.
You want to.
Look, I'm a slow learner, but one thing I've learned over 30-odd years of campaigning is don't preempt your leader. So I'll let Tony define the messages for the campaign, and I'm not going to preempt that at all. But, he'll use his own words, but I think what I want to say is obviously we start out in this campaign clearly the underdogs. This will be a very difficult election for us to actually win. But I think Tony has changed the political landscape. Greg Sheridan said in The Australian the other day he's been the most influential opposition leader anyone can ever remember in terms of knocking off a Prime Minister before an election and changing the government's climate change policy and changing their boat people policy. So we'll take the fight right up to Labor, but it's a big mountain we've got to climb.
You've been in politics a long time. Have you been surprised at how quickly this government came unravelled?
Look, I agree. It is extraordinary. Mr Rudd achieved popularity levels never seen in Australian opinion polling and has collapsed. But I guess a number of us viewed him as a creature of the polls, and it would be the polls that would undo him. And once the polls started to turn, with all the disasters that engulfed the government, the collapse of the Copenhagen conference, and then all the disasters with pink bats and the school building program, the waste of spending, his polling numbers really started to deteriorate, and he had nothing to fall back on, and the union heavies just tore him apart. And I think one of the big unknowns in this campaign will be the effect on the electorate of the Labor Party taking this extraordinary gamble of knocking off a one-term incumbent Prime Minister and then rushing to the polls just a few weeks later. I think that is the big unknown in this campaign, just how the voters will view that extraordinary political assassination.
Well, Senator Minchin, the Labor Party might say that they killed one leader and you killed two, so you're one up on them.
Well, there have been in Australian politics a history of oppositions changing their leaders. Indeed, the Labor Party had any number of opposition leaders. But for a government, a first-term government, to assassinate a Prime Minister who, as I said, has been as popular as any Prime Minister in Australian history, in the way that it was done, within 12 hours, with the head of one of our biggest unions going on TV that night sort of issuing his instructions to his colleagues in the caucus. We've never seen anything like that. And our leadership issues pale into insignificance. And I think the point is, with Tony Abbott, we have, as I say, I think one of the most effective opposition leaders this country's seen, and someone who really will campaign, I think, very well and in a very disciplined fashion, and mean that we now, despite what people thought just 8 months ago, I think we do have a real contest.
He has been an extraordinarily effective opposition leader. Do you actually think that he looks like an alternative Prime Minister? Can he make that jump? Can he reach across the aisle and pick up those middle ground votes that he needs in order to become a Prime Minister?
Yes, I do think he can, Chris, and I think the fact that the Labor Party took this extraordinary step of assassinating Kevin Rudd suggests that the Labor Party think he can too. And Tony is a very experienced Member of Parliament and politician. He was a senior member of the Howard government, of course, and I think the fact that Tony has, in a sense, campaigned so well just in the last few weeks, I think is a sign that he can indeed garner the sort of support which is required. What voters are looking for is certainty and stability and an end to the sort of chaos which we see on the Labor side. And I think Tony is conveying that message and that impression to voters.
Is Julia Gillard a game changer for you? Does she completely change the environment? You thought that you might win if Kevin Rudd was Prime Minister. Doesn't she now make it a very different game indeed?
Well, I'm one who's, whether it was Kevin Rudd or Julia Gillard or Billy the Goose, has always said that this would be a very tough election for us to win. It is the Rudd-Gillard government is a first-term government. They have the advantage of incumbency. They will outspend us 3 or 4 to 1. They rely on character assassination as their modus operandi in campaigns, so they'll be throwing everything at Tony. So we were going to be in one hell of a fight, whoever led the Labor Party. We didn't actually think they'd go so far as to knock off an incumbent Prime Minister, although we had gamed that scenario. They are rushing to the polls because they believe they still have a honeymoon effect with the change of leader, and they'll try and take advantage of that honeymoon effect. But 5 weeks is a long time in a campaign, and I think that will be a levelling experience. There is a new focus on the opposition leader, so I think it is game on.
Nick Minchin, thank you.